Who were the women that first saw the empty tomb? Why were they bringing spices, and why is this moment so important? The goal of this podcast is to help people know Jesus through the Bible. Today we talk about the encounter Jesus has with the woman after the resurrection in the book of Luke, chapter 24. Welcome to the Jesus Table podcast.
Hello. Thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Elliot Reyna. I'm here with Dr. Nick Venditti as always. And today we're going to be looking at another encounter Jesus had, but this time it's after the cross and after the resurrection. We're going to be looking at a couple of these. Isn't that right, Doc? Why don't you tell us about the one for today?
Well, the one for today, we're really looking at the first witnesses of the resurrection. And, again, we don't want to be controversial, but there are people out there that, sort of relegate the role of women to one side. But, I mean, women, especially an event as important as the resurrection, the first witnesses obviously were women, so we'll be looking at all of that and the role that they played, and just marvel at God's sovereignty and his wisdom and all the other things in having women being the first witnesses to the resurrection, so we'll be discussing all those things.
Yeah, and I mean, this is obviously I think the climax of the whole story and our faith, right? Jesus has risen. But I think it's good to remember that what they were feeling at the time, they had just seen the one they believed to be the Messiah for a lot of them, or if not, then at least a prophet or a teacher they really loved or whatever, be killed. They're all sad. And then and here we're jumping into this, now this switch, right? The big from like the movie where everything looks like the hero's lost and everything's dark, and then here we go to the climactic
and surprise
ending. Yes, the biggest surprise in history.
That's wonderful.
So I'll read the first three verses. We're going to be looking at Luke chapter 24, and we'll kind of read it piece by piece so we can get the full picture here and talk about it. So I'll read the first three verses. Luke chapter 24. I'm reading out of the NASB version, and it says this. But on the first day of the week, at early dawn, they came to the tomb, bringing the spices which they had prepared. And they found the stone rolled away from the tomb. But when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. And they always, obviously being the women that we'll mention a little bit later. And so... Well, so who are these women? Why is it the first day of the week? Why are they bringing spices?
Yeah.
Why are they even going to a tomb? So I got a lot of questions already to start off.
Well, I think we all do. This is, as many Bible scholars say, and even the Apostle Paul says, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, if I remember correctly, if this did not happen, if this event did not happen, then our faith is in vain. We see throughout the Gospels, and of course we have Old Testament prophecies about the Messiah, the coming of the Messiah, and we've looked at that pretty much in depth, a number of other episodes. But this is really the focal point of human history, in the sense that not only was Jesus born, as we know, in the incarnation, but at the same time he died, and each of the Gospels give a little different perspective of Jesus' death in the same way. It's really a focus, about the death, but all of them agree Jesus died. And all of them agree that he stayed in the tomb for 3 days. And all of them, if you look at the four Gospels, and plus the book of Acts, as a matter of fact, I'm going through my devotional now on the book of Acts, they all agree that the tomb Jesus didn't stay in the tomb. He rose according to what God had promised. So for us, as followers of Jesus Christ, as believers, it's not only about his death, but it's also about his resurrection. And here we have Luke's version, and again, we can check out the other the other gospels, but we're trying to focus more on Luke 24, his perspective regarding the resurrection and the importance of the first, that there were actual witnesses. And four gospels all agreed that the first witnesses were women. And I think two of the four gospels mentioned, and I think Luke, let me just look quickly, also mentions the name of the women, I believe. Or if not,
Yeah,
two of the other
it says it
gospels
later in verse 10. It
named.
says, now they were Mary
Okay,
Magdalene and Joanna and Mary, the
exactly.
mother of
Yeah,
James. So that's what verse 10 says.
and the other women with them. So anyway, you know, God chose in His infinite wisdom, as only He can, that these be the first persons that literally saw the Jesus resurrected. You know, and later, of course, we'll be looking at the end of this podcast, we'll be looking at how uh, how the men, or let's put it like this, the disciples didn't believe Him. You know, here you have women, and I think they were, you know, first of all, can you imagine something as stunning as this happening?
Right.
You know, the disciples, except for John, was the only one that was anywhere near
That
the
we know of,
cross.
yeah.
You know, the other disciples had, yeah, the other disciples ran away, and you know, Peter denied Jesus, etc., etc. And you know, we use the phrase "scaredy cats." You know, they were like little scaredy cats and just ran away for, you know. I mean, and I think, you know, sometimes we come down on the disciples and the first century believers, you know, really hard. But you know, seeing the pressure that's under all of this here, and as a matter of fact, the next session will be the rest of this a part of this chapter, which will be the two on the road to Emmaus. You know, and you know, they were disillusioned, and you know, it's like we were expecting this, but here you have I mean the women, excuse me, you have the women here, and you know, they're expecting, you know, they carry their spices, and that was part of, you know, sort of the ritual, because of course, just imagine you go to the tomb. Normally, what happened was, for the first week, the family would be there, and you know, Jesus had died on Friday, and we're talking about early Sunday morning, so the body already, you know, had stench and smelled and everything. So they would
Okay.
take the spices to sort of slow down the process, and also, you know, some scholars say there's that usually they as much as 20 pounds 20 pounds of spices. It wasn't just taking a salt shaker and shaking a little bit of, you know, salt
Wow.
on Jesus or any spices like that.
So I had to carry 20
So,
pounds, these women.
well, some scholars say that as much as 20 pounds was
Wow.
used many times, you know, to wrap the body, to keep the stench, you know, away. And here you have, you know, and the four gospels, when you read all four of them, they interact. You know, the women were sort of wondering, what do we do now? Who's gonna push the rock? You know,
Right.
who's gonna push the stone away, and all of that.
So
Yeah.
they were assuming that maybe the soldiers would help them roll the stone away, that they would give them that permission, and then they would put the spices. They were
Well, suppose, you know, the tomb was sealed,
right.
so I guess they were just wondering, you know, well, you know what the gospels say is that they asked themselves, who's going to roll away the stone?
Right.
We really, I mean, we could say, I doubt, you know, that they thought that the soldiers would do that, because the tomb was sealed, you
Hmm.
know, and you know, I guess it's one of those questions like, what do we do now,
They
you
were
know?
hoping to get
And here
permission,
they
maybe like maybe we can talk them
or
into.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. You know,
Interesting.
sometimes, Elliot, the Bible is just silent, but those are real good
Hmm.
questions. No, those are very, very good questions. You know, because just put ourselves in that position, and then here they go, and then all of a sudden, you know, it's like, uh-oh, what's going on? And it depends on which gospel, you know, but all of them agree that the tomb was empty, and all of a sudden the women are like, you know, one of the gospels, I forgot which one, says, oh, did somebody take his body,
Hmm.
you know? So maybe somebody stole, and you know, some people that don't believe in Christianity or believe in the resurrection, they say, well, the women were confused, you know, they went to the wrong temple. But when you look at the gospels, I mean, I'm sorry, to the wrong tomb, when you look at the Gospels, it's very obvious that
Yeah,
it
no.
didn't
And
happen
that's why
yet.
at the end of this
You know?
chapter, the Jews start saying,
Yeah,
tell them that they stole it, and
right.
they start fabricating
Yeah,
this lie, because if they
exactly.
actually had Jesus' tomb and the woman actually went to the wrong tomb, they could very easily be like, no, it's
Right.
right here. Let's show the body. Let's showcase
Yeah.
it one more time.
Yeah,
Put to
exactly.
death all the
Yeah.
rumors, but they couldn't. And the
Yeah.
fact that they couldn't
Yep.
is why I don't think
Yeah.
that's valid.
That's the easy. That would have been the easiest way to squash Christianity,
Mm-hmm.
and what the disciples were preaching.
Exactly.
Christ died, rose, and was resurrected. That was the message, and that continues to be the message.
Yeah.
And of course his return, but that continues to be the message of today.
Yeah.
For you, for me, and whoever listens and is a follower of Jesus. And again, the women were the first ones
Yeah.
to be those witnesses, have that wonderful
And
privilege,
that's so crazy to me.
And it's curious also, yeah, it's curious to know because even at that time, women were uh, under law were not allowed to be witnesses. They
Mm.
weren't thought to be credible witnesses, and here God chose women to be the first witnesses,
Uh-huh.
to the resurrection. And I just applaud, the courage of these women. And of course, they were confused,
Mm-hmm.
because it's like, hold on, wait, where is the body? What
Yeah.
happened? Did somebody steal? And of course, the whole thing with the angels. And I just love speaking about the resurrection because it just cements my faith and
Right.
my trust in Scripture.
Yeah,
It just
it's what,
does.
if like you said, if there wasn't a resurrection, then our faith would be useless. It would have no point, it would have
Yeah,
no
yeah,
substance. But
yeah. We
here,
can believe in Mickey Mouse or whatever.
right?
Seriously.
Yeah, but that's the difference between our
But
faith and Buddha's dead, Muhammad's dead, all the other,
yeah,
but the tomb is empty, right? But I want to go back to what
exactly.
you just mentioned. So women
Yeah,
were not considered to be valid witnesses, right?
yeah.
They were, they just didn't count. So if someone said, "Oh, there was a murder, there was
Well,
this,"
it
and
was
if it was a
a
woman,
patriarchal society,
right?
you know,
Unfortunately,
and
but
yeah,
so if
but that was the
Christianity,
reality.
right at the time, but if Christianity was made up, like some
Yeah,
want to assume or proclaim
right.
or say, then why would they make it up that it was women that found the tomb? If I was going to make up a religion, then I would
Exactly.
make up that there was a bunch of witnesses that were men, because obviously they were
And
the ones that
yeah,
count. But the
and
fact,
powerful men.
right,
And
that
you would
the
say powerful man. If we're
uh-huh,
going to be, come up with a story or a
right,
storyline, uh, for it to be credible for the rest of society, you would have most probably, Roman guards
yeah,
or Roman
respected man,
centurions,
uh-huh,
yeah, high priests, etc. All these great powerful men, be the ones that said, "Yep, without a doubt,"
yeah,
and I put my seal on this, and
yes.
this is it.
But the
But
fact that the
God has a
gospel,
different way.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Gospel, the kingdom is like an upside down kingdom, and he
yeah,
chooses women who obviously we don't believe are less worthy at all. That's the whole point. But at the
right,
time in the society, they were
exactly.
not considered valid witnesses, and the writers like Luke and Matthew and Mark, they stayed true to what happened. They could have changed the
Yeah,
details, been like, you know what, let's
exactly.
just say it was some guys, just because
Yeah,
it'll be easier for people to accept and believe. But they
that's
were
very
true to
good.
what
Yeah,
happened. They said, this is how it went down. We're just going to write down that it was women, and if people don't want to believe, then that's on them. But I think that just
that's very
cements
good. Yep,
my faith even more, and the fact that this is true.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And of course, the angel, and it's curious because the angel says, and this to me is one of the greatest lines I think in the Bible is, what are you guys like what are you women looking for, for the one who, who's alive. He's not dead.
Yeah.
Even the angels sort of proclaim and sort of, and isn't this like what he said to you? Go tell the others,
Right.
and the women are the first evangelists and the messengers, not only of the resurrection, but to tell the disciples, hey, Jesus told you guys that he would meet you in Galilee. Get them together, go up to Galilee, and Jesus is going to show up.
Right.
It's like, And of course, the women would be perplexed, and all the other thing, fearful,
Yeah.
of all of that. Mark, Mark chapter 16 up to verse 9. After that, some of the earlier manuscripts, uh, uh, there's a little controversy over that. But again, Mark with what they call the short ending ends with, and the women were fearful. I mean, if you see something like that, I mean, this isn't your everyday recurrence. It's not something that you just, oh,
Yeah.
I've seen this before. Yeah, this is
Another
a
resurrection.
rerun. Exactly, exactly, exactly. And but this is really the tenet, the heart of our faith, of our
Yeah.
trust in the resurrection.
And
Yeah.
to think, I sometimes find it crazy. How can they not know? Jesus said that this would happen multiple times, right?
Right.
But it just kind
Yeah.
of went right over their head
Yeah.
in a sense. And I don't blame them. It probably I would
Yeah.
for sure been the same way. And they weren't expecting. Do you think he rose? Let's see. If they were expecting it, then they would have seen the empty tomb and they would have celebrated
Yep.
immediately. But they were confused. They
Yep.
were like, "What's going on? Did someone take it?" Like you said.
Yeah.
And I'll go ahead and read it real quick, so we can
Yeah.
see the story continues from verse 4 to verse 9. Still in Luke 24, it says, "While they were perplexed about this, behold, two men suddenly stood near them in dazzling clothing. And as the women were terrified and bowed their faces to the ground, the men said to them, 'Why do you seek the living one among the dead?'" There's that
Yeah.
question. "He is not here, but he has risen. Remember how he spoke to you while he was still in Galilee, saying that the Son of Man must be delivered unto the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and on the third day rise again.' And they remembered his words, and returned from the tomb and reported all these things to the 11 and to all the rest." So I love how Jesus was so specific. He didn't
Yeah.
just say, "I'll die and I'll rise." He said, "I'll be crucified." He said how he would die. And in 3
Exactly.
days, exact,
Yep.
frame, I'll
Yeah.
rise again. And still, they were perplexed, and I guess Jesus had taught them so many things that they just didn't catch it. Maybe they thought he was being poetic. I don't
Yeah.
know. But, and then they go into proclaim it to all the rest. So here, it doesn't say that these men were angels. It says that they were two men with
Right. But
dazzling
when we
clothing,
look
right?
at the
But
other gospels, exactly.
exactly.
Yeah.
That we can see that they were angels. And angels, I mean, I remember learning this in Bible college. It means messenger. That's where we get the word.
Right.
Gospel
Yeah.
comes from the Greek evangelion, and there's the word
Right.
angel in there.
Exactly.
Evangelion,
Right.
angel.
Good
So
news.
these
Yeah.
are the ones who bring news, the ones who bring
Right.
or hear the news that
Yeah.
the tomb is empty, right? And
Yeah.
to
Well,
think
it's
that,
from angelos. Angelos is
uh-huh,
what angels is in the Greek, and they are messengers. As a matter of fact, I mean, again, I don't want to go on a rabbit trail on all of this, but we do know from the other gospels, this was not only a supernatural act of God, but angels. They're appearing. They're messengers from God. So here
hmm
you have, the messengers from God who are angels. Not the way you see them sometimes with flappy wings and things like that.
right,
That you think, but you just they're the messengers telling the ladies, what had happened, the women what had happened, and they're the ones chosen to go out and tell the guys or the other disciples and the rest, because if I remember correctly, it says
hmm
also the rest. So
yeah,
it wasn't limited just the disciples, you know. It
hmm
was limited. I mean, it was for everybody, and of course
yeah,
that should help us in rejoicing that the resurrection and the death and resurrection of Jesus was not just for the 12 or for this
hmm
inside group. It was for all of humanity. You
yeah,
know,
and that's something that women proclaim,
right,
not this, only the disciples. These women weren't even the disciples; they were just
right.
they're followers of
Yep.
Jesus, but they were the ones sent to proclaim this,
They
to
weren't
share
part of
this.
the 12. Let's put it like this: they were not
Right,
the 12. In
not part
that
of the 12.
sense.
Yeah,
And
and it
they're
reminds
part
me
of the
of the
larger group. Yeah,
yeah, the larger group of disciples, right?
right.
But it reminds me of the our first episode where we were talking about the woman at the well, that she goes and she
Hmm.
shares to the whole town. It's
Right.
almost like another image of that. It's just they come and then they go share
That's
to
very good.
everyone,
Yep.
another woman, and
Yep.
and then so I have another question here. It's not here in Luke, but then
Hmm.
in the same retelling of the story of Matthew, it says that
Hmm.
I think on the way to go share this news to the disciples,
Mm.
Jesus meets them,
Right.
meets these women, and he himself tells them basically the same
Right.
thing. You know, he says,
Yeah.
"I have risen," and this and that. So, do you think Luke just didn't know this? Because we know Luke obviously did
Yeah.
his research and asked around, and he chose not to
Right.
include it, or what do you
Well,
think?
I think more than anything that, well, obviously, Paul tells us that there were many encounters, you know, there were
Mm-hmm.
many encounters. So I don't think that the four gospel writers, it's not like they had their little camcorder or their iPhone and they're filming everything and showing everything. The important thing is, first of all, that they did have an encounter with Jesus. All the women did meet the resurrected Lord. And I think what it does more than anything is it gives us different angles. It's like when you have a camera, film something, different angles. You can look at it from different angles.
Mm.
But there's nothing, I would say, where they contradict each other fully. It's
Right.
like, sometimes the focus, what was the focus? And it's Luke, when you look at the whole entire Gospel of Luke and also Acts, it's really his focus. If I remember correctly, chapter 8 of Luke also, he talks about women, that they were the great supporters of Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
of his ministry. And the role of Luke, in many ways, or his focus, is on the less, how can I say it, the underprivileged. Let's put it
Right.
like that. Each one of the gospel writers has their major focus or more of a focus, and we see how Luke, his focus was, on the Samaritans, the
Marginalized
underprivileged,
the.
marginalized. Exactly, that's it. The marginalized,
Mm-hmm.
and here you have Luke not only talking about the women as the other gospels do, but also we'll see next week. We'll see the two disciples from, they weren't part of the 12 on the road to Emmaus, but they were also witnesses. And that was another
Mm-hmm.
time that Jesus presented himself to other people. And of course, when he finally presents himself to the group, the larger group in Galilee.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me.
What are you getting?
Yeah, so
Yeah, that's
very
true.
interesting.
That's a that's a good way of putting it, because I remember I'll even tell people a story, and if someone else was there, they'll add details or something that I just forgot to mention, or
Right.
they saw from a different perspective. People ask me, how did you and your wife meet?
Yeah.
And if we're both there, I'll start telling the story, and my wife Susanna will be like, "Well, and then this happened. No, that was after this." And I was like, "Oh, that's
Right.
right." Or
Yeah,
sometimes she just
exactly.
has a different perspective or memory. So doesn't mean I was lying. Doesn't mean that what
Right.
happened. The main points of the story we agree on. Is maybe just on the little details that we remember it
Sure.
differently. And I think that shows that this is an actual uh, historical event, and that's why people have different perspectives. Not It wasn't something that
And
was
these were
fabricated,
real
and everyone.
people. These
Exactly.
were all
Yeah.
real people. And I think it's also very important, the end of this part of the women with the encounter when they go to the disciples. If you want to read the last couple of verses of, I think
Yeah.
it's verse 11 and 12. No, 10, 11, and 12. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, after this, they're going to share it to the 11 and the rest, and then it says, verse 10. Now they were Mary Magdalene and Joanna and Mary the mother of James, also the other women with them, were telling these things to the apostles. But these words appeared to them as nonsense, and they would not believe them. But Peter got up and ran to the tomb. Stooping and looking in, he saw the linen wrappings only, and he went away to his home, marveling at what had happened. So, quick question right here. It says Mary, the mother of James. Is that James, Jesus' brother? Is that just another way of saying
No,
Mary,
it
the
would
mother of
be
Jesus?
another
It's another
James. It
another
would be
James.
the
Okay,
mother of another James. I would assume so. I'd have to look it up to be 100% sure, but I don't think it's James the brother, because one of the
okay,
other gospels says the mother of Jesus. When it
okay.
refers to
So
Mary. Yeah.
there's a lot of Marys. So
Oh
it
yeah.
gets
It's, well, for the Hebrews it was Miriam, but yeah, it's Mary. Exactly.
gotcha. Yeah, but then so they share it, and that's what's also interesting to me. They don't believe, like
Yeah.
Isaiah, like Jeremiah, like so many prophets, and it just happens. People don't believe,
Yeah.
but then the
And
one that does
especially the
run to the tomb is Peter,
disciples. I mean,
right?
the disciples don't believe. And again, as you mentioned now, Elliot, as far as Peter, in John, the Gospel of John, of course, he adds that John also went with Peter, to the tomb.
Yeah.
So again, some of them, did Luke know that? He possibly did, but he just felt he didn't need to include that. And John,
Hmm.
since he wrote the Gospel of John, he needed to write himself into the story because he was part of the
Yeah.
story. So,
Yeah.
but what's fascinating is again what happens today. You speak to people and you talk to them about Jesus and him dying and being raised from the dead. And there are those people that believe. I consider myself to be one of those, and you, of course, and so many others
Hmm.
that believe in the resurrection. But there are others that say, "Oh no, that's all make believe. That's all a lie." Have you ever seen that? Have you ever seen somebody rate? I mean that kind of aggressive behavior sometimes when you tell people,
Hmm.
what the scriptures teaches. So,
Yeah.
but it's fascinating. It's fascinating because again, this is the heart of who we are as a believing community. And we can say it because there were witnesses there, and we'll be discussing that in other passages. But there were witnesses there. These were real people. These were real women. The disciples did exist. It wasn't
Yeah.
like a play, a fiction. You start inventing characters and name people. These were all historically did exist, and there's just, I mean, so
Yeah.
much proof to the resurrection in that sense. But again, you have to
Yeah.
believe. You
And
have to
people, so
believe.
there's a group of people
Yeah.
going around saying the resurrection was a spiritual resurrection, that he didn't rise physically. And the
Right.
Gospels make it clear that this is
Yeah.
historical. The,
And it was a total
yeah,
hallucination of
and
everybody,
of,
which is something that's, if there's anything that's
it's that.
impossible, when people hallucinate, it's not, a group, let's say a group of 12, let's say the 12 disciples. Uh, Hallucinations are individual. It's not a group
Yeah, they could not see the
hallucination. I
same
mean, there's
thing.
no historical data to exactly,
Right. And
exactly.
over
So
500 people that
our
saw
faith
him.
is
No.
right, exactly, exactly. So again, we can celebrate the veracity of the Gospels, and we can celebrate the veracity of the witnesses. And again, we're just very grateful that Jesus is who he says he is, and people have an encounter. And again, we'll be seeing the different encounters in the
That's
upcoming
right.
episodes.
Yes. Well, thank you so much, Doc. I love that. And this is exactly
No, I do too. I
where our
mean, this
faith is
is,
placed,
yeah,
and to believe that Jesus has risen
exactly.
and what that means.
That's right.
Thank you all for,
And we invite others to
yeah,
believe, and we invite others to believe. Search the
yeah,
scriptures. It's like what Jesus said. Search the scriptures. And I know I'm stealing from next week. I mean, next episode we'll be talking about two on the road to Emmaus. But again, Jesus invited them to search the
yeah,
scriptures. Remember. So and we do
yeah,
the same. Please, if you don't believe or if you have any questions, contact Elliot, contact us, and search the
yeah.
scriptures.
And if you need tools, there's a bunch of tools out there. One, we've mentioned it before,
Yep.
Daily Treasures. Dr. Nick has a bunch of videos that are really short, and you can watch every day and read the Bible throughout the whole year and search it for
Right.
yourself, and your faith will
Yep.
grow for those who believe, and for those who are still figuring this out, I believe Jesus will reveal himself to you. So thank you for listening,
Very
and
good.
we'll see you the next episode. We'll continue talking about resurrection and different encounters that Jesus had after that. Thank you all. We'll see you.
Thank you so much
Thank
again,
you.
Elliot. Yep.
Thank you for listening to the Jesus Table podcast. We pray that these conversations are a blessing for anyone seeking to know who Jesus is and for those seeking to know him even more.